welcome to Prequelize This. I'm Jon.
I'm Dave.
And we just saw the Dreamsonic 2023 tour last night in Denver with Animals as leaders, Devin Townsend, and Dream Theater, hosted by Dream Theater, the headliners. And we wanted to just give you a quick review or recap of how the show was. So let's start. Dave, let's start with Animals as Leaders, the first act.
Yeah, so Animals as Leaders probably the least familiar to some degree. I've listened to them a bit here and there, and this was probably fairly new on your end, Jon. So, but for anybody who's not familiar, they're instrumental prog metal band, kind of on the gent side of things, kind of get that even kind of like staccato almost feel to the rhythms and so forth. Which really came through really powerfully at the Mission Ballroom, where especially with the bass kicking through, there were moments where, in a good concert, you're gonna feel the bass, you're gonna feel the guitar chug or whatever. But there were moments where it just came through, and it would take your breath away, and you just feel your shirt ripple. Yeah, and it was excellently well done. I think the way I was talking about it last night was I think I was trying to, and I'm rephrasing this a little bit, but it was like they were, dissonance and resonance on the edge of chaos.
Yes,
and it's kind of, they were like, and I think it's a lot of the gent influence where there's, and it's only a trio. You've got Tosin Abasai, Javier Reyes, and Matt Garska. And Matt on the drums, Javier playing bass, Tosin on guitar, what was interesting is you've got the three of them going, but there was a lot of paralleling in the music, and I think in kind of that end of prog metal to what do we call it, post metal to some degree maybe, you kind of get that feel where it's musically there's kind of ships passing, but at the same time it's it's just this interesting sense of that it's holding together and yet on the edge of falling apart, and it really powerfully in that sense. Yeah, seeing that happen live. I don't know, these all instrumental math metal bands, and I'm not sure I would call them math metal exactly. They transcend a little bit. Yeah. In their creativity, but part of why I hadn't gotten into them is that's not really the kind of thing I listen to on record a whole lot, but live it's really something. Yeah. And going back to what you said about just the sound in that room and the thundering going on with their set in particular. We had just eaten. So it was a general admission show, and we were in the we lined up early, and doors opened at 6. We lined up at 5, and we had brought our food with us, and it was burritos. Right. And so might have been a calculated risk there.
I literally was still kind of processing my burrito I just ate, and then this boom, these subsonics were coming through. And I was a little bit okay, was that because I just ate the burrito, or is that because Animals as Leaders is trying to make me throw up? It was crazy.
which is not a critique of
right.
It was just that
it was a feature.
It was a feature. Well, a certain music is visceral in the way it's presented and in the way in which you feel the power of it, and it definitely. So if you're wanting a nice mellow, I'm going to sit and kind of groove, that's probably not what you'd be looking for. But they were encouraging. It was general admission with a good amount of open space. So you kind of had the pit going, and they were encouraging it a little bit. And apparently, Tosin was saying that this was the first place on the tour that wasn't seated in the front there. So at least in that. At the Mission Ballroom, there was the opportunity for that. Yeah,
I think about 40 dates, I think they were saying. There's 8 left to go in in the tour. So we're pretty far along into the tour, and this was the first time that there was an open floor and not a bunch of seats, and so he was really excited about that.
Yeah,
He loved the energy coming off of the circle pit, and I loved the fact that I was not in.
Not it. Yeah, true. Yes,
because we're old, but watching it was cool.
It was a good introduction. I mean, having listened to him a little bit, but not having the live experience. I mean, they are a really solid live band.
Yeah, really encourage you to see them live. And they did 9 tracks, about 45 minutes.
Yep.
And then Devin Townsend. So we had a little bit of a break there to break down the stage. Everybody had their own drum kits, which we weren't sure about at first. But so then with a little bit of a break, Devin Townsend came out about 8:05-ish. Show started at 7. And then he played for about 55 minutes, doing 8 tracks. And, well, first, let me tell you his band. So, he's worked with a lot of people over the years, and here he was with Mike Keneally, who is an amazing utility player. The guy can do anything. He was in Frank Zappa's band. He's played with Joe Satriani and Steve Vai live. So Mike Keneally is an amazing addition to any prog band, and he can play the most difficult stuff. And was not, as far as utility players go, he had a cool stage presence still.
Yeah,
he wasn't just in the background.
No, and you even there were moments where he's on keyboard and guitar simultaneously, which is kind of a fun moment. Where and he's one hand, like right hand on keyboard, and then he's tapping on the guitar, and you're kind of okay.
Yeah,
this is why you can have the 4-part band, and he's filling in a couple of parts.
Right. James Leach on bass, Darby Todd on drums, and they've been with Devin since 2021. But star of the show, Devin Townsend. He's so I loved it.
Yeah,
I think you did too.
Oh yeah.
But let's acknowledge he's not for everybody.
He's got a personality, and there's no filter to the personality. Is that fair?
Right. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. He but does that in a way that is somehow engaging. It's not clunky. Like, and I don't, spoiler alert, Dream Theater was on the bill, and James LeBrie, without Mike Portnoy, and I suppose we should just stop talking. It's been 12 years since Portnoy's been in the band, but we just need to say this, right? Portnoy would be the one to get on a microphone and welcome you to the show and all that stuff. James LeBrie was, I don't know if he had an off night or if this is just James LeBrie, but he's awkward when he talks to you. Devin Townsend makes it like, he just makes you feel like you're hanging out in his living room and he's going to play you some songs.
Well, he has his own version of awkward, but it's an embrace the awkward kind of a thing where, there's enough self-effacing humor to it where he's sort of like, I'm going to make fun of myself, and then I'm going to turn on you, and I'm going to make fun of you, and then I'm going to make fun of myself again, so that we're in this together, all laughing at ourselves because we're prog fans and we're nerds. And actually, that was one of his jokes at one point. He's like, hey, as prog fans, how many of you grew up and you were a nerd? Raise your hand. Just the comedy bits to it add kind of a fun lightness to it. And there's, for as heavy a music as he plays often, and he can be, if you're at all familiar with his body of work, it's kind of all over the place. Mm-hmm. Sometimes within a single song, it's all over the place. Mm-hmm. But that's a little bit of his personality too. But there's a lot of times a very heaviness to what he's doing, but there's a lightheartedness to the heavy music, which is really interestingly engaging.
Yeah, it is. And I wanted to go just really quick to kind of what you can expect. So we've got representation from Lightwork, Epicloud, Physicist, Accelerated Evolution, Ziltoid. So by Your Command from Ziltoid was fun.
That was,
Teria,
I think,
and Infinity. So we're going back to 1998 with Infinity, and we got the early 2000s, and then we've got a little bit there of the new album. So he did a cool job of going across the whole career.
Yeah.
And concert-wise, our main criticism. So we were with some friends and who weren't familiar with him, and but one of the guys is avid concert goer, and correctly pointed out that this wasn't a good way to evaluate Devin Townsend as an artist because the sound was crap.
Yeah.
And it was. He was absolutely maxed out. Devin Townsend is one of the coolest things about him. I think is in the studio he does so much layering.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's so many harmonies and things like that. And we're not going to get into the argument of using tracks live, but to get the full effect, he's got to use tracks live. So some of the background vocals, right, and things like that. But we were losing those harmonies. There were also sound effects and things, and we were losing those in this just absolutely pushed, hard, distorted thing. And we couldn't pick up. I felt bad for the people who were new because Devin Townsend is an amazing, clean singer.
Yes.
As well as his effects he does. But he's an amazing vocalist.
Right.
And you got all those YouTube reaction videos out there on it. And we didn't quite get that because even when he was singing clean last night, everything else was just such a wall of noise.
Yeah.
So that was the only disappointment. But the set list was a good choice. His energy was amazing.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he had the crowd really moving.
He was just having fun, and he was encouraging everybody. I mean, do something. I mean, he'd encourage you to do stupid stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and try to do it. I mean, again, you got the circle pit going, and he's going to do more of a ballad type deal, and he encourages basically the circle pit to do a slow walk pit
On the ballad.
And so they're doing this, and they're all kind of walking arms in the, and it was the silliest looking thing, but it's engaging in that, like, you're like, look, let's all be stupid together.
Yeah, it was really fun. And then we had a little break again to take down a drum set, and we had Dream Theater for I believe the proper set was an hour and 15 minutes. And then an encore. So before we get there, though, we'll just talk about the set. So we had 3 songs from the new album, newish album that's already been out almost 2 years.
Yeah, right.
But we had the Alien, Sleeping Giant, and Answering the Call. Answering the Call being my least favorite from the album, but still a good time.
Right.
And Dave and I were just talking before we were recording that. I really highly rated this album when it came out, and I listened to it about 6 or 7 times in the first month that it came out. But then I haven't gone back to it.
Other things have happened in life.
And I think it's because there's so much good music coming out that it's almost like an album's lifespan a little bit.
A little shortens it, but yeah.
Is that first month or that first couple of weeks or when you finally get around to an album, there's maybe a 2-week window where you're playing it 3 or 4 times.
It takes a little more deliberate effort to keep revisiting.
Yeah, to come back to an album.
Yeah,
it's you got to think of it,
right?
And you got to come back to it. And I did that a lot with other Dream Theater albums. So it feels weird to me that here's one where I'm like, how come I didn't come back to that?
Right.
But it's still good. I mean, those songs were really good.
Yeah, good choices from there, but then also a very nice mix of, like, really going back to, Caught in a Web and Pull Me Under. So, like, if you were the early stage fan of this band, those 2 right there for me, it was just, thank you. I've now seen those 2 in concert, and my life feels fulfilled.
Yeah.
Just because,
Yeah.
Caught in a Web got me, and I'm going, yes. And then right toward the end, they pull me under, and I'm like, oh,
right,
heaven time here.
Those were excellent choices. And then this was pretty cool. They gave some proper love to 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence.
Yeah.
We got the last 3 tracks what does this mean?
I don't know.
Um,
Because it's 3 tracks, so that's what you did. You didn't know you did it, but that's what you
3
did.
tracks. From 6 Degrees. So 15 minutes of
Yeah.
6 Degrees. So that would be, what are those called? Solitary Shell, About to Crash, Reprise, and then the Losing Time grand finale.
Yeah.
And that was really cool.
Yeah.
Because, I've seen Dream Theater enough times where that album, that disc, it's the second disc, right?
Yeah.
That, because they'll do Glass Prison,
Right.
a bunch. That disc, I don't know how much they've played from that.
Sure.
Other than that, those times where they play the whole thing, right? I think
Yeah.
they did that for Score, maybe, with the orchestra.
Yeah, I think maybe.
So that was a treat.
Right.
And
And
then
then you were really happy with the epic that they threw in at the end there.
Yeah, with the epic, right. So leading up to the tour, they did a fun interview thing to promote the tour where they were asked, are you going to play any epics with having a shorter set time? And John Petrucci was like, that's what kind of band we are. So yeah. And I really wasn't quite sure what they were going to do. And they did The Count of Tuscany from Black Clouds and Silver Linings, which is my second favorite epic from Dream Theater. So I was really happy with that. My favorite being Octavarium. Maybe Change the Seasons after that. What's your favorite epic?
No, I think Octavarium, I would agree with you on that. I mean,
Yeah.
again, I was saying that before, but it's just kind of the musical reference. If you're a fan of music, it's just fun to unpack the random referencing to it.
Absolutely.
Where the Count of Tuscany is not doing that kind of a thing.
Right.
But and that's one where I think I'm less familiar, and I probably listened to that one less. But it was the kind of thing that reminded me of it, and probably is going to have me pulling that album out again.
Yeah.
But then, so then we get an encore that. So I kind of gave you a spoiler of that yesterday,
Yeah.
because they've been doing this, but they.
So spoiler alert.
Yeah.
If you're watching this because you're about to go to the show, turn it off if you don't want a spoiler on the encore.
Yeah, but so they did The Spirit Carries On and had, Tosin came back out, and you've got him and John kind of side by side, kind of throwing licks back and forth through it.
Mm-hmm. Darby Todd came out.
Todd switching off with Mangini on the drums.
And they switched more than once. That was cool.
Yeah, it was kind of, and occasionally, I think in the end, I'm trying to remember who, was Mike back on the kit, and Darby was kind of playing in behind him, so they kind of both in on the kit at the same time.
Yeah.
And then Labrie and Devin Townsend kind of throwing back and forth on varying verses and so forth, which, it's kind of an interesting, and I'm not going to get overly critical on this one, but I mean, James's voice has seen better days. There's when he doesn't try to stretch into a higher register, he does better.
Yeah.
And I'm not being overly critical. I mean, if I'm going to try to sing at this point, it's going to be the same kind of a thing where it's like, okay, you don't have the range you had.
And Denver does have the altitude that affects people.
Which he was commenting on. Devin was commenting on, but Devin was taking it more in the opposite direction of, there's no air here. I feel all the better.
Yeah.
But partially just because he's nuts that way.
Yeah, he is.
But you kind of have, it was kind of an interesting where with the two of them and their two different styles, because you've got James doing his version and then Devin just rips in and lets loose. And it's kind of a fun addition to that.
It was. It was really fun. And it's a real testament to the lack of ego with Dream Theater, because you're taking a risk there, because Devin is known for just such a powerful delivery that he can do, and they even let him do his crazy scream on the very last The Spirit Carries On. It was The Spirit Carries on, the Devin screaming on thing that lasted 15 seconds or whatever. So I think it's really cool that Dream Theater put ego aside to turn that into just a fun time. A little bit of a party there, even though it's a flashlight waving ballad type of deal, but also a little bit of a party.
Well, it was nice. It's they're celebrating doing this tour together, being representatives of the prog metal genre in varying aspects of the prog metal genre, which is kind of nice. But kind of celebrating together both the diversity of what's going on within the scene and kind of the grounding unity that they have musically, and that they can jump in together and they can throw back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been interesting to have, like, you kind of wonder, like, well, how come you don't get a couple of the other, like, neither of the other bass players were in there, but probably at that point you don't need more bass.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of that already, so it's like, okay, but I really liked it. I mean, and then you got them. They're finishing the show together, and they're doing kind of curtain call together, and it's a good sending to say, this is. Were you blown away by this concert? If you weren't blown away, what were you paying attention?
Right. Yeah. It was a great closer. It was a great evening. I kind of made a list to see of the studio tracks to see like kind of how much music did we get, and it was 3 hours of music. You got your breaks to change the setups between bands, but it was 3 hours of music, and that is a treat because the ticket prices were great.
Yes,
I mean after fees, $65 or something.
So
so that part is also excellent, and I'm not sure how much that plays to the you folks that are seeing them at different venues. I don't know how the economics of all these things, how it works, promoters versus what the management team asks for the bands and stuff like that. But kudos to all three artists for keeping it affordable. It was an affordable show, and it was super fun.
Yeah, totally well worth going. If you've been already, you've seen it, you know what we're talking about. If you haven't, and they're coming to one of the cities that are remaining, and you have the opportunity, highly recommend it. Yeah. Or just watch for whenever they're not, and I think they've talked about this is not necessarily a planned, here's an every year kind of a thing, but just a periodic.
Yeah.
Probably when the mood strikes John Petrucci and he figures, all right, we're going to do this again. Because it's a Dream Theater thing, but it also seems to be very strongly a John thing. And so when he's in the mood and it happens again, I think we'll probably want to do it again. So we definitely recommend it. Yeah,
definitely recommend it. And if there's a home video release of it or something like that, this was a good one. I liked everybody's set list. And if you collect Dream Theater, right? I find this one to be unique enough to buy on home video because the set list was cool, and then that closing encore is cool. That's rewatchable.
Yeah,
for sure.
I would hope it would be nice if they had from one of the shows a really good recording of it and a release of that would be kind of nice. So if anybody from one of those bands happens to somehow watch this, it's just a hint, just an idea.
Yep.
I don't need credit, just do it.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
See you later.